Hello and welcome to another modeling video. This is Alan from the Mokono Man at YouTube with another model video. This video will be a bit chaotic and different, working on the high grade Bandai 14Fs Gelgoog Marine type in the Cima color scheme from 0083 Stardust Memory. Started a decade ago during the early years of the channel, utterly ruined in attempting a complex candy scheme. I've even soiled the box at a party many years ago and abandoned to be rotted. Even a second kit purchased to attempt it all over again. It is an older kit with 6 runners, basic instructions, typical to your high grade line in the earlier years, and a bit tricky and difficult to build nicely. Typical snap builders will hate or struggle with this project. I did remove some parts to make it magnetic for ease in disassembly and painting. This year I unboxed this project and found it in such a case. Chemicals were used to strip the paint and quite a bit of sanding, though there is a lot of debris stuck in panel lines and detail, which will be scribed out and resubmerged, resanded and polished. A bit of blue tack stuck in the joints for masking when I did originally attempt it. Some components seem to be broken and repaired with a pin vise and wire. Dealing with older inferior work was a much bigger pain, though a satisfying journey than starting from scratch. The thought process and products used was very fascinating and quite nostalgic, almost like meeting an old friend again. A lot of work went into it during the first attempt, including filling seam lines and fixing faults. None of this was documented. I see I adjusted the angle on this peg for a less awkward and better posed finish and had to re-superglue it together. A lot of bare detail, and decided to have a little fun with kotobukiya modeling support goods in sizing up parts and cementing them into place. The painting and stripping process besides a tutorial has also been lost. The collecting of footage occurred when I didn't know what I was doing and how to document a build to my current standards, though I'm in the process of finishing all of my half-built projects. There's a lot of very shallow panel line details suggesting circles or holes, though with a shiny paint, an actual hole is far more attractive, yet maybe more difficult to injection mold. This is easy by creating a guide with your blade and drilling a hole of the correct size with your drill bits and pin vise. You can widen the hole with your blade. I'm also fascinated by some of the cutout sections of this kit, like the rear of the legs housing the thrusters, and can make it look like a much deeper seam where it's separatable and hollow, much like a modern master grade. This is just grinding down and cutting the edge to expose the internals. For a better look, you can also grind at a chamfer edge. As this video is very chaotic, crazy and all over the place with massive time skip, I'm going to be very experimental and have fun with it, showcase anything that may be of interest or a bit different to my usual content. I do apologize if this is outside of what you're expecting to watch. Fascinating looking up to higher end builders at the time. I tried every conceivable panel line filling method and made videos about it to achieve really high end gloss and candy schemes, and I could see that I've tried a few methods from Tamiya Basic Type to Squadron. With a bit of primer we'll see later, some areas did sink and it shows different stages that I had an attention for detail. The modern method of a heavy primer or the Mr. Dissolved putty cleaned it up all very nicely. Also in 2010 to 12 I had a fascination with mobile suits with a lot of thrusters and vents, and believed the more of these it had, the stronger and interesting it was, being a massive fan of the Advanced Zeta stuff. In spirit of that, I glued some larger pieces from the kotobukiya modeling support good parts. As I've also broken a lot of pegs, I've tested the strength of some of them and see that this kit breaks down very easily. Some parts look like a bloody dog chewed on them, and drilled holes down the rest of them and filled them with steel pins for ease of articulation and no breakage during painting. This finished the model and was able to be snapped and posed for any further issues and to judge if it's ready for painting or not. For me, painting a Gundam is very tedious and time consuming of assembling, breaking down, modifying, assembling again, breaking down and sorting in colours a second time. Mounting on alligator clips, some parts needing further modification just for the ease of painting. Masking can also prolong this process to the reason why I simply don't build enough of these projects. I'm also stuck with high grades as master grades just prolong this even further. Each of the parts are coordinated in their color specification and a mass of parts are going to be painted a different color. My choice of primer is automotive filler primer or spray putty. In Australia I buy this from Super Cheap Auto, but you can get it from any automotive or hardware store. It's cut down with standard lacquer thinner at a rate of 1 part putty to 3 to 5 part thinner. I'm able to look for any faults, splits or issues and mark it with a marker to fill it with primer and resand a second time. As this has been painted before, I had some faults such as paint crazing and lifting. This showed where there was remnants of some pretty bad paint that I could rescribe, sand thoroughly, give a chemical bath and fill with thickened filler putty mixed with baking soda as a basic type putty. This was all thoroughly sanded down, polished and primed again. Moving to a candy and metallic finish, instead of using a gloss black, I'm using a metallic black that I mixed with automotive colors for a superior and a pretty deep sheen. This was very easy to lay down and showed virtually no faults. I was able to blend a whole series of different hobby and car paints to get 2 or 3 tones across the gunmetal and metallic finishes. With the candy, instead of just an outright straight silver base, I went for a few tones of gunmetal, alclad silver and even some other colors to put the candy on top and give it a almost shadow anime cell shade effect, much like the very dark and dreary schemes from 0083. This was thoroughly enjoyed. Some details were picked up with hand paint. Moving on to the mustard color, this was the absolute most fun. I've collected about 3 to 4 gold to copper colors and just painted various shades. Again, much like the anime cell shading method, but in a hand that's freeform and soft edge camouflage. Where light would fall on it based off the box art, I just painted different sections, leaving the rest black and then filling it in with other various colors. Some small sections like vents and parts in the fin of the head were hand painted. Being experimental and playful, I had an incredible lot of fun, and with each different collection of paints being candy or just metallic, multiple layers of automotive clear was built upon it to be as shiny as humanly possible, buffed and polished, and a final coat of floor polish to give that wet look sheen. The candy just popped ever so perfectly, unlike the first attempt, and not being a straight candy and relying off its sheen, it had multiple tones from the undercoat. This project sat upon my bench for a couple of months in various stages, and once the final clear was applied, it was many weeks that I would not touch it with my bare hands until ready for assembling. For each of these parts, a little PVA glue was applied to the joints and clicked into place to allow to dry and harden with a few further days to dry. This is to prevent any fingerprints ruining the wet finish and holding it together. Some of these joints and mounting points were loosened to allow for paint build-up and not to create gaps or just disintegrate. Chemicals can also leach into the plastic and make it brittle and fall apart. Allowing it to cook off and fully chemically harden to its ultimate finish is ideal to wait patience and just leave it in parts for as long as you can possibly humanely stare at it incomplete. This bore great amount of fruit for me, as I've had this wonderful finish to look at all assembled. For an older kit, color separation was very fateful and didn't lead to a lot of masking work, and was more heavily reliant on shading dark spots on the sides in various areas where at times it was actually confused for a bad photography. I would put a crystal mono eye instead of the decal being yellow, which got lost in the mustard gold color. Going off anime and manga imagery, I did not spot any markings number or Zeon symbols on Cima's Gelgoog, so I opted out using any water slide decals, which I usually love doing on these builds. Weathering definition was reserved purely for panel line washes to make panel and details pop. Overall, very pleased how it popped. The Gelgoog is one of my all-time favorite suits, and such a chaotic project, a failure and shame of my past, has popped up to be a very interesting story in this complete kit. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, until next time, stay tuned for further content.